To understand the life of Helena Blomqvist is to accept that reality as we perceive it is merely a suggestion, a rough draft waiting to be edited, polished, and populated by a cast of characters that dwell in the borderlands of our collective subconsciousness. Her story is not a linear march through calendars and almanacs. It does not tick by in seconds or minutes. Instead, it flows like the heavy, mesmerizing mist that often saturates her photographs, moving with the logic of a dream where the impossible is commonplace and the silence is deafeningly loud. Born in 1975 in the quiet industrial backdrop of Smedjebacken in the Dalarna region of Sweden, Helena did not simply grow up in a town, she grew up in the fertile, boundless soil of her own imagination. Dalarna is a place steeped in Swedish tradition, a landscape of deep forests and folklore, but for a young girl with a mind that vibrated on a different frequency, the physical surroundings were just a stage. While others saw trees and roads, she saw potential portals. While others saw the mundane grayness of everyday life, she sensed the lurking presence of stories that had not yet been told, stories of melancholy, of magic, and of a quiet, creeping darkness that was as beautiful as it was unsettling. It is said that artists are often running towards something or running away from it. In Helena's case, it was a yearning to be elsewhere. In her youth, she and her friends would dream of escaping the predictability of their surroundings. They longed for the pulse of London, the misty moors of Ireland, or perhaps most telling of all, the surreal, velvet draped universes created by filmmaker David Lynch. They wanted to inhabit a world where bluebirds always sing, a reference to a longing for a place where the surreal and the serene coexist. This early desire to physically and mentally transplant herself into a better or more interesting reality became the foundational stone of her entire artistic career. She realized early on that if the world she wanted didn't exist, she had the power to build it herself, piece by piece, shadow by shadow. This was not merely a childhood phase of daydreaming. It was the apprenticeship of a master world builder, the seeds of the distinct cinematic aesthetic that would later define her career were sown in these early years of longing. She began to understand that a story doesn't need to be a movie with a beginning, middle, and end. It could be a mood, it could be a single frozen breath, it could be a feeling of unease that lingers long after one has looked away. She learned to cherish the misfit, the oddity, the outcast, the strange creature that doesn't quite belong. Like the photographer Diane Arbus, who would later become a significant inspiration, Helena found beauty in the imperfect and the marginalized. But where Arbus sought them on the streets of New York, Helena would summon them from the depths of her own mind. As she transitioned from the dreaming girl in Dalarna to the disciplined student at the School of Photography and Film at Gothenburg University in the late 1990s, Helena did not abandon her inner world. She learned how to externalize it. Her education gave her the technical language of aperture, exposure, and composition, but her process remained intensely, almost stubbornly intuitive and tactile. In an era that was rapidly sprinting toward digital immediacy, where a photo could be taken, edited, and published in seconds, Helena chose the path of the slow, methodical craftsman, her studio in Södermalm, Stockholm, became less of a workspace and more of a laboratory for alchemy. Here, she does not simply take photographs, she constructs them. Her process is a testament to the belief that believability comes from the labor of the hand. Imagine the scene. The studio is quiet, filled with a scent of glue, paint, and old fabrics. Helena stands over a workbench, her hands moving with the precision of a watchmaker. She is building a world. It starts with a sketch, a pencil tracing the contours of a nightmare or a fairy tale. But the sketch is only the map. The territory must be built. She constructs miniature scenographies, tiny stages where her dramas will unfold. She sews costumes for the dolls that are barely the size of a hand, stitching melancholy into every hem. She sculpts props, rents antique accessories, and scores the world for the perfect textures. This preparation is not a prelude, it is the essence of the work. For months, she might labor over a single image. She might build a dilapidated house from scratch, weathering its tiny boards to show the passage of decades. She might construct a forest where every branch is placed to cast a specific, menacing shadow. She acts as the architect, the set designer, the costume department, and the casting director. Only when the physical reality in front of her lens matches the emotional reality in her head does she touch the camera. When she finally captures the image, she often uses long exposure times. It is not just a technical choice, it is a philosophical one. By keeping the shutter open, she allows time to bleed into the frame. She captures not just the light, but the feeling of the light. The result is a magic feeling, a high-key luminosity or a dense, velvety shadow that feels thicker than air. The camera becomes a tool to document a reality that she has willed into existence, a reality that is physically there in her studio, constructed of wood and cloth, but which represents a psychological landscape vast enough to get lost in. If one were to walk through the gallery of Helena's life work, one would notice a distinct lack of normal heroes. There are no dashing leads or invincible warriors. Instead, her universe is populated by the fragile, the forgotten, and the fading. She has a profound affinity for the concept of the endling, the last known individual of a species. This theme of extinction, of being the last one left when the lights go out, permeates her storytelling. Her protagonists are often animals, but they are not the animals of nature documentaries. They are anthropomorphized souls, bearing the weight of human sorrow and wisdom. A monkey might sit in a wheelchair staring out at a world that has moved on without him. A frog might be the last of his kind, a golden relic glowing in the dark night of the soul, representing the tragedy of environmental collapse. These animals are not just cute stand-ins, they are witnesses. They possess a dignity that humans in her stories often lack. They seem to understand the gravity of the Anthropocene, the era of human impact, and they watch the destruction of their habitats with a quiet, heartbreaking resignation. Then there are the women. Helena's human subjects are often elderly, their faces mapped with the wrinkles of a century lived. She creates characters like the faded ballerina, a woman who may have once danced on the grandest stages but now pirouettes in the dust of her own memories. Is she hallucinating? Is she remembering? In Helena's world, it doesn't matter. The memory and the dream are made of the same substance. These women are often portrayed with a mix of deep respect and whimsical tragedy. They might be seen figure skating towards the afterlife or hosting a tea party for mice. They are the queens of their own diminishing domains, holding on to their dignity even as the walls crumble around them. The children in her stories are equally haunting. They are often ghost children, wanderers in a landscape that seems too big and too scary for them. They remind us of the vulnerable figures in fairy tales, the Hansels and Gretels left in the woods, but in Helena's version, the words are darker and the breadcrumbs have long since been eaten by the birds. These children are often accompanied by animal guardians, a nod to the comfort we seek in the non human when humanity fails us. They glide across dark waters or stand in dense forests, their eyes wide with a knowledge that children shouldn't possess. Despite the heavy themes of death, extinction, and loneliness, Helena's life story is not a tragedy. It is, in fact, laced with a potent, subversive humor. She understands that the line between a nightmare and a joke is often just a matter of lighting. There is a burlesque quality to her work, a theatricality that winks at the viewer. She might place a group of smiling 1950s bathing beauties next to a dead giant octopus, creating a jarring juxtaposition that is as funny as it is grotesque. She might show a fox on crutches, a pathetic yet endearing image that elicits a chuckle before the sadness sets in. This black humor is a survival mechanism. It is the laughter in the dark. It is the absurdity of existence captured in a single frame. This humor also serves as a critique. By using the visual language of old B-movies, horror films, and national romantic paintings, she exposes the artificiality of our own narratives. She shows us astronauts, women, in a rewriting of history, who are laughing on the moon, their helmets off, an impossible feat that highlights the dream of exploration rather than the scientific reality. She plays with the creases in the backdrop, intentionally letting the viewer see the seams of the illusion. This is her way of saying, yes, this is a stage, but so is your life. A recurring chapter in Helena's internal biography is the exploration of what comes next. She is fascinated by the transition, the moment between life and death, the passage from the physical world to whatever lies beyond. But unlike the brimstone of religious texts, Helena's afterlife is a place of quiet reflection. She visualizes these transitions as portals, a boat gliding over a still black river, a misty forest where the path disappears into the fog, a happy hunting ground where the extinct animals roam free, unharmed by the fires of man. Her depiction of death is not terrifying, it is solemn. It is a return to a silence that the modern world has forgotten. In her vision, the afterlife is perhaps the only place where true connection is possible, where the lonely girl and the mangy fox can finally rest. She draws upon the comfort of stories like The Brothers Lionheart, where death is not an end but a flight to another valley. Her work asks the viewer to consider, if we destroy this world, where do we go? Is there a backup drive for the soul? Or are we like the endlings, destined to fade into the white noise of the universe? Today, Helena Blomqvist continues to work from her studio in Stockholm, a city that floats on water much like her characters float in their liminal spaces. She remains an observer, a quiet watcher of the zeitgeist. She is deeply engaged with the issues of our time, the climate crisis, the sixth mass extinction, the social isolation of the digital age, but she filters them through the lens of the poetic. She does not shout, she whispers. Her life is a testament to the power of introversion, of diving so deep into one's own mind that one eventually breaks through to the other side, finding a universal language of symbols and archetypes. She has exhibited her work in grand museums and humble galleries, from the Fotografiska in Stockholm to venues in Paris, Berlin, and beyond. Her work is held in prestigious collections, preserved like the rare specimens she photographs. But accolades and exhibitions are just the external markers of her journey. The real story of Helena Blomqvist is the story of a woman who refused to accept the world as it was presented to her. It is the story of a creator who understood that we are all, in some way, lonely animals waiting for a sign. She builds these signs with her own hands, stitching together the fabric of reality and dream, humor and horror, past and future. She invites us to step into her small, hand-built rooms, to look out the window at the painted twilight, and to ask ourselves, is this a dream? And she answers, with a knowing smile from behind the camera, yes, but it's the only one we have. As she moves forward, continuing to create new series and explore new themes, the narrative remains circular. The old woman in the photo might be a future version of the young girl in the forest. The animal in the wheelchair might be a spirit of a forgotten ancestor. Helena's life story is not a straight line, it is a spiral. She circles back to the same obsessions: time, memory, nature, but each time with a deeper understanding, a sharper focus. She sketches, she builds, she lights, she waits. The process is slow, but the result is timeless. In a world that is constantly rushing, Helena Blomqvist dares to stand still. She dares to look at the shadows until they look back, and in that exchange between the artist and the dark, a spark is struck, a flash of light that illuminates the beautiful, tragic, and hilarious mystery of being alive. Her story is not over. As long as there are dreams to be dreamt and shadows to be explored, the architect will be in her studio, gluing together the fragments of a broken world to make something whole, something holy, something utterly her own. She is the guardian of the dreamscape, the keeper of the lost, and the photographer of the invisible, and we, the viewers, are the lucky travelers allowed to visit her world, if only for the duration of a long, quiet exposure.